Hi, this is Cal Harrison for Information Security Media Group. Welcome to today's session entitled Compliance plus Security in the Connected Device Era, featuring Mike Nelson, VP of Digital Trust at DigiCert, and Edison Alvarez, Senior Director, Regulatory Strategic Planning Cybersecurity at BD. Before I introduce our speakers, just a bit of background on this session. With ever-increasing threats of cyber attacks, outages, and data breaches, building digital trust into business operations is as crucial as it's ever been. But most companies know they could be doing more to assess and avoid vulnerabilities in the enterprise, in the software supply chain, and with connected IoT devices. DigiCert asked decision makers from around the globe to share their experiences implementing digital trust practices, from enterprise trust to device and software specialties. Common themes emerged. They discovered clear differences between digital trust leaders and those who lag behind. Today, our speakers will discuss digital trust, focusing on a very hot topic in the healthcare field: security and regulatory compliance for medical devices. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about Information Security Media Group. We currently publish more than 24 international media sites: Bank Info Security and CU Info Security for financial services, Gov Info Security for the public sector, and Healthcare Info Security for the medical community, plus Info Risk Today, Data Breach Today, and Careers Info Security. Each of these sites is dedicated to providing education and news on information security. With over 1 million members registered to our websites, we have created a true information source tackling the key issues of interest to our unique audience. If you have questions for our speakers during this session, please submit them via the chat on your screen, as well as any technical issues during the webinar. In addition, I want to emphasize that the content being presented in today's webinar is copyrighted material. It is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you or your institution would like to use the information presented in today's session or are looking for customized training education, please contact us. Next, a little about our sponsor. DigiCert is the leading provider of digital trust, enabling companies and individuals around the globe to navigate the connected world with the confidence that their digital footprint is secure. Our first speaker, Mike Nelson, VP of Digital Trust at DigiCert, oversees the company's strategic IoT market development for all products, including device trust, software and content trust, enterprise trust, and trust lifecycle manager. Nelson frequently consults with organizations, contributes to media reports, and speaks at industry conferences about the risks of connected technology and what can be done to improve the security of these systems. Prior to DigiCert, he spent his career in healthcare IT, including time at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, GE Healthcare, and Levitt Partners. Mike's passion for the industry stems from his personal experience as a type 1 diabetic and his use of connected technology in his treatment. Next is Edison Alvarez, a Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs at BD, which is a global medical technology company that is advancing the world of health by improving medical discovery, diagnostics, and the delivery of care. Edison brings over 15 years of experience in product management, cybersecurity, risk management, and team building. At BD, Edison has established several teams and enterprise capabilities, including portfolio and product management, product security engineering, and information cybersecurity governance. Gentlemen, great topic. Thanks for being here. Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you. Let us know what you've got in store for us today.
Thank you, Cal. Appreciate the introduction. Edison, it's good to be on with you.
Likewise, sir. Likewise.
Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come have this discussion with us.
It's
we're really excited. We're really excited to have Edison and also to have all of you join us again. We, as a follow-up to a webinar we did a couple of weeks ago on the state of digital trust that we conducted recently, we had tremendous excitement. A lot of people attended that, and we decided to do a follow-up and invite one of the attendees from the webinar, Edison, who had lots of great comments and questions during it, to get on and talk about some of the aspects of the survey related to compliance. Edison, as mentioned in the introduction, helps with compliance at Beck & Dickinson. He's a tremendous thought leader in this space, but he also, a unique skill is he comes from the security side of Beck & Dickinson as well, and he spent time in that camp. And so he's a tremendous thought leader. He's a great partner of ours at DigiCert, and really appreciate his thoughtfulness and the leadership he has in the medical device space. He's done a lot of great work. So Edison, thank you for being on.
Yeah, thanks again, Mike, for such a kind introduction.
All right, now I'm going to throw some curveballs at you today, so I hope you're on your toes and you're ready for a vibrant discussion. You've always been good at handling those, so I'm going to try to throw you off a little bit, but I'll be nice to you.
Thank you.
Okay. But with that, let's jump in. I think to start, we're going to be talking about compliance, and an interesting stat that at DigiCert's Trust Summit last year, Robert Herjavec spoke, and the most interesting data point that he shared at our summit, from my standpoint, was that 60 to 70% of every dollar spent on security is compliance related. And I think that's so compelling, especially for the discussion that we're having today, Edison, because the regulatory environment for you guys has certainly changed recently. But what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm not very surprised. At Beck & Dickinson, we're a regulated industry and then manufacturer, and so obviously regulations and compliance are near and dear to how we do business. Non-compliance means we can't do business. Non-compliance also means we may put, our customers at risk or our patients at risk. And so, this stat actually, is not very surprising to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like saying that organizations typically spend money around two things. The first is pain, right? So you have a breach or there's a compromise or something bad has happened. Organizations are willing to spend money to put pain out, right? I'm sure like most device manufacturing companies have experienced some kind of that in the past, and you always get more willingness to spend when there's pain. But the other is around opportunity, and that's where it becomes like product differentiation and spending money to get better features and things like that. And would you say security is a differentiator at this point? Have we matured that far?
Not yet. Selfishly speaking, I would hope that one day it does become something that people see as a differentiation. I've talked about this with you, right? Safety in automobiles is a differentiator at times. I don't think right now where we're at, it's necessarily that. No.
Yeah. I would sadly, I would agree with that. I think with the regulation coming, it'll be interesting to see if that changes a little. But in my thought here is it's really gonna be the compliance and the regulatory angle that's gonna drive the change that we're looking for.
Yeah. No, it's definitely gonna be. I think that launch, right? It's when we talk about regulations, and especially in our field, the number of regulations that are being either introduced or being updated are creating a great complexity. And then you multiply that by the type of products or the number of products organizations are trying to either develop or continue to support. It just compounds that. So I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to unpack the complexity you just talked about. We're going to be doing that in a little bit, so I'm excited for that. One of the stats, a few data points from the survey, but the one here in the middle that I think is really compelling is that 74% of the respondents of the survey said that they have compliance issues, challenges meeting compliance, which is why we're talking today. So let's jump into the changes in healthcare, specifically related to medical device. Can you tell us, Edison, what what happened recently? What changes came about that is kind of changing the landscape in medical device industry?
Yeah, so you've got the screen up, and you see the U.S. FDA, putting out new requirements. Those were based off the omnibus provisions released earlier last year, and what they're looking at is really, looking at medical device manufacturers and increasing the level of responsibility, accountability of these devices across their life cycle. So a couple of big things that included was increased regulatory authority from FDA in regards to how they can enforce requirements for products going through a clearance. Also increased expectations from manufacturers like BD to have stronger post-market surveillance. So just not doing it through the design and development of the product, but that speaks to that whole product lifecycle perspective. How are we monitoring? How are we identifying and addressing cybersecurity vulnerabilities or risks on a product post-launch? How we communicate these things to our customers when we encounter them, just ensuring that we also have plans in place on how we're doing this. And the last piece of it that I thought was really significant was around software bill of materials. I think we've all talked or know a little bit about this, but one of the big things with that is, how big is that box, right? We have a lot of different things that we use within our products, and how well are we keeping track of that inventory in our systems, and what those third-party potential vulnerabilities and how they can impact our products. I think those are the big things that happened from a regulatory perspective over the last 12 months.
Yeah, that's a great synopsis. Thank you for giving that. I hear you talk about some of those things, and it's like, they're pretty, we're going to get into some of the security practices that are included in there. But like you talk about device updates, right? And post-market. So devices are deployed, and now you have to monitor and you manage them. And I love that the FDA is requiring manufacturers to do that. But it also is like, haven't they been doing that for a while, or do they just ship it and forget? Tell us, like, I know that there's complexities and challenges of monitoring and updating devices, but like, give us some insight into that. Why is that not happening today, and why has that been such a challenge?
Yeah, it's something you just said towards the end there, right? Like just making it and sending it out and forgetting about it. And sadly, for some medical devices, and across, I'm talking industry, right, for a second. Sometimes it does happen when you send out a medical device and it's not frequently updated. I think the change has been, really what drives that update is shifting. So in the past, you mentioned a little bit before too, is you introduce new features into products, or you have a driver for why you're making product updates. Well, cybersecurity is now one of those reasons, or one of those triggers of why you actually need to do an update to a product that is not necessarily to include a feature set or to be a differentiation for your product. It's going to be now a requirement to sustain that cybersecurity through the product lifecycle.
Yeah, and that, as a security professional, you cannot do security well one time and then forget it. And I'm guessing you guys have devices that are in the field longer. We're going to dive into some of those in a little bit, but you have to be able to update, and you have to be able to update secrets and tokens and make sure that you're resilient to, today's technologies. And so I love that that's included. So let's jump into, at a high level, I'm sure that there are a lot of medical device manufacturing companies that are in different stages of maturity in terms of readiness. Can you maybe give me some insight, and then I'd love to dive into, some of the challenges that you guys, or things that you're doing to be ready for this?
Yeah, from a readiness perspective, when you look at this, it's almost looking internally and thinking, what do we have across the organization? What level of compliance, let's say, across all of your different products or businesses do you have, right? So you just don't get secure right away, right? There's a process. Some of the things, and you said we'll get into it, is some of the devices that are currently in market that you now have to meet if you make an update have been in the field for a number of years. So there's some level of uplift that's going to be necessary from organizations, and that requires some planning and that requires prioritization. So yeah, it's obviously difficult for any size organization to really look internally and almost assess themselves where they are and help the organization really understand where they need to prioritize those.
Yeah, that's certainly challenging. Where would you say you guys are in the journey? I mean, do you guys feel like you guys had enough lead time on this? Like, is it, I know just based on our partnership and the work that we've done together, you guys have been doing security for quite some time at Becton Dickinson. It's not something that, the FDA got the regulatory authority in October and you're like, okay, hey, here we go. You guys have been working for a long time. Can you tell us, maybe give us more insight into that journey and the challenges of that because since there's no on and off button, some of those
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah, no, I definitely can share a little bit now. To be fair with FDA and other regulators, there's been guidance before last year. It's just last year's guidance was a lot more comprehensive and a lot more, guidance given on what they expect. But to your point, BD's been at this for a number of years, and not just because of regulatory requirements, but we do firmly believe in doing what's right by our patients and understanding early enough that cybersecurity was going to be something that was going to be very important to our devices. We're a large global organization. So when you ask, where are we in this journey? I'll kind of take a hierarchical approach. It's from a organizational view, we've been at this, we've tried to create, a holistic program around, how we manage product security, but there's also then business units that we have in different products. And again, based on where that product is in their own journey, and sometimes determine how mature those are. And I think this speaks to the complexity of, what we're managing from a cybersecurity perspective in medical devices. It's not something that we update every week or every month. Some of these product life cycles are long. Some of the updates are, pre-scheduled, if you will. And because we are regulated, don't happen as frequently as, we have on our mobile devices. And that's for a good reason, right? You don't want to necessarily update a medical device without the right validations in process with the right markers in place. And so just understanding that world, I think, speaks to how difficult it is to bolt on, let's say, cybersecurity, but really start integrating it into your practices, into your design of your products, into your management of your products, throughout the entire organization.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Any idea how, I know you guys are big, any idea how big your number of software-enabled devices that you guys have in the market today? Maybe you can quantify this challenge for you guys today.
Yeah, it's funny. This number keeps being embedded in my head, just from looking at regulatory compliance and the different areas that we place products. We have, I think it's close to, if not around 200 software-enabled medical devices. Now, they're at different stages of their life cycle, like we keep kind of referring back to. So some of them may not necessarily have active development and practice. And they're at different stages, but just that sheer number, gives you kind of sense of, what global manufacturers are trying to manage, and then the different types of products within those 200, right? You have anything from lab automation to point of care to those different types of devices that, manufacturers typically have to manage. So again, it's a complex environment for sure.
Yeah. And yeah, man, the challenge of that, I can only imagine. I'm guessing they're geographically distributed.
Yep. We are a global company. So while we say FDA, because they are one of the leading regulatory, I think, bodies when we talk about medical device cybersecurity, but you've got, different regulations in Europe, you've got different things in Greater Asia, you've got country specific regulations as well within those two regions that, make it difficult. And South America and Canada, although they try to align a lot to what FDA has, have their own nuances as well.
Yeah, so that stat, 74% of organizations are struggling with compliance, gives you some insight into why, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is a massive challenge that I can understand and appreciate the challenge for organizations that have not, unlike the posture you guys have, where you've been after it for a while. I'm guessing there's still, you've mentioned some of the challenges still that you have, but like, you wake up October 1st and you're like, holy cow, we've got these new software products we need to submit, and we're not fully ready for that. I get the challenge of that. And then for a large, the other thing that's interesting is to think that, data is so key. When I think about connectivity on medical devices, the reason that we do it is it improves patient outcomes. I just say this all the time, but I'm a diabetic, and my devices I love because they give me more data that allow me to live a healthier life. And that's why connectivity is coming. And it also allows devices to perform better, to last longer in the field. There's a lot of benefits that you get from having that data, and it's not going away. And my guess is more and more, most devices being submitted are going to have some level of data capture, some level of software that's running on them, because data is gold in today's world. Everybody wants data so that they can make informed decisions. And so that challenge is not coming. Let's talk about, so I've transitioned to the slide here, and this has, these are the security best practices that are found in the guidance. Now, you mentioned that the FDA had put the guidance out, and they released the initial guidance, I think it was 2016, and then they've updated it since then. Now, when we use the term guidance, I just want to make it really clear, because I was at HIMSS a couple of weeks ago, and a panel member got up and was like, it's still guidance and the FDA can't regulate. And there was someone in the audience who pretty much got up, threw a chair at the guy and said, hey, you can't be spreading that. So even though we're using the term guidance, the FDA still has the regulatory authority to deny. So don't be deceived by the term guidance. I want to make that very clear. And so here are the security practices, and they're based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. But Edison, this will maybe require you to go back to your security hat a little bit and wear that. But as you look at these security approaches, none of them are like rocket science. They're pretty fundamental security best practices. But how do you prioritize security approaches? If you're waking up and you're saying, hey, we need to start doing security, how do you look at these things and start to prioritize?
You got to look at this, and there's different school of thoughts, and we've all heard the terms like, lowest hanging fruit, and those type of things, or, prioritized by risk level. While all these things are true, there's also a component of like, well, how do we have a very holistic approach on how we're going to manage this? And then look at things that give you not just the most benefit, but give you the way that you can manage this long term. And obviously, the more things you can couple together, the better it is to implement the benefits of doing something like this. So, not a very straight answer to your question, because I don't think you'll ever be able to have one. I really annoy my wife at home because I always have to overthink things. So again, it's like, it's not always just the easy thing to get done. It's like, hey, sometimes it's based on impact, or, how much risk exposure do we have? And then if you can bundle things together with one solution, or something that can be adopted by many of your product teams relatively easily, then those are the things that you start to really focus on, so that you can drive greater value for your organization and ultimately your customers and patients.
Love that. Yeah, I love that. You've got to weave risk assessment and understanding that, but then getting more out of less. And I think that, there are certain approaches and tools that can be used that can help you check multiple boxes. Let's talk about software. Software was a big focus of the FDA language. Anything you want to share about what you guys are doing around software and some of the new things you have to do? You mentioned SBOM earlier.
Yeah. It's software. There's updated verbiage I think the FDA put out, even to their guidance around what they constitute in scope of this guidance. But software, if you look at it in medical devices, the applicability of that in a regulated space are just going to continue to get, let's say, muddier, right? For a lot of the things that you mentioned, right? We increase connectivity, and management of data. Well, where does it start? Where does it stop as far as a medical device? And so when you look at this guidance and you look at software, it says, hey, there's, it's really potentially all up for it to be applicable. So how are we managing software development from a security perspective? And the biggest things that come into play are around, well, what's the integrity of that application? Right. So you think of application signing. How well are we managing the data within that product through encryption and through different areas? So, understanding really, and the FDA has made a really strong point around product lifecycle. It's also like the ecosystem. So how are you managing the data within your product? How are you sharing that information to other devices? And, how are you doing that? Are you doing that securely?
Right. Software is I say the solution that's on fire in healthcare right now. And I would say, I always talk about the three pillars of secure software. One, you have to do vulnerability scanning, right? You have to know what's in there. You need to know what vulnerabilities it has, and you have to have really good scanning tools to help you do that. And that's for everything. The FDA is not just saying code you're writing, but it's the whole bill of materials, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The third party, open source, homegrown. So
That's
you've got
it.
to be doing your scanning.
Yep.
And then associated with that would be the creation of an SBOM. And interesting, I love that the FDA is requiring the submission of an SBOM with submissions, right? They're requiring you to include that document. I think you made a great comment. What was it that you said about SBOMs on the webinar that we had a couple of weeks ago?
Well, it's that over compliance. I think I was saying during the webinar. Just think of it as really raising the level of, fundamentally how we're managing cybersecurity. But software bill of materials is the topic of debate, right? Even in industry, and I think there's a lot of different school of thoughts, right? How deep are you going in your software bill of materials? What's the manufacturer's responsibility? I think we can all agree it's once you put it in your product, you have responsibility for ensuring that's updated. But and one of the things that I always say too is like, okay, we're creating this software bill of materials, like, and we're sharing this. How are we ensuring the accuracy and the security of that SBOM as we share it with FDA or even our customers, which is a long term, obviously aspirations of SBOM, and how we're updating that as well throughout the product life cycle, and how are we taking action based on those components. You just keep wrapping security all over that, right? How are we doing all of that specific to SBOM securely to our customers?
Yeah, we're big advocates of signed SBOMs so that they have integrity, just like your software.
Yeah.
And so, I got, so we're big proponents of that, and I hope that the FDA will adopt that. The final pillar of good software, of course, is software signing, and you guys have done a tremendous job being ready for that. And I think that's another solution. When we talk about scale, and I'd love to just talk about scale for a second. If you think about, you have however many development teams or product teams out there, and standardizing your security approaches across them has got to be such a challenge. Can you talk about, as you guys identify solutions, partners like DigiCert, as you're talk about the importance of scalability and why that is such an important component for you guys as you're rolling it out to your teams?
So I'll put a business hat on. I think the first and foremost really is cost, and simplicity in how you're managing these solutions. Don't want to shift from the ultimate goal, which was just improving patient safety, but as a large organization, cost has a huge component of this. So when we look at it, driving a holistic and centralized approach will keep that cost down. It also helps with adoption throughout your organization. So I mentioned BD has, somewhere around 200 products, let's say, on a good guess, maybe 100 or so have some type of active development. Well, when you're doing something like application signing, or you're doing anything that to meet a regulatory requirement like SBOMs, anytime you can centralize and simplify how we're doing that across the organizations, and it just makes that adoption rate throughout your groups much greater.
Love it. In fact, that's a data point from the survey. One of the findings, we broke the survey down into leaders and laggards, the top best performing organizations and the bottom, those that are underprepared and not doing as much. A characteristic among the leaders that were doing well with security and trust was centralization and scale of their solutions. We see more and more organizations, instead of saying, hey, we got a fire, let's go put it out, and that's with one product, where they're looking holistically and stepping back and saying, hey, we should look at this from a centralized standpoint so that we can have transparency, visibility, even auditability. So, like with signing, I always ask organizations, do you know who's signing and the types of files that they're signing? Do you have the ability to revoke those signing credentials, right? Having those types of capabilities allows you to rest better at night because you've got a centralized solution that gives you those tools and powers. All right. Anything else on software before I jump on off that?
No, I think we're good.
All right. We talked a little bit about device updates, and the FDA is pushing this. And clearly, I mean, over the last 10 years in healthcare, there have been a lot of discussions about, medical device manufacturers would be like, look, we can't do this because you don't allow us to touch our devices once they're in your network. And HDOs are saying, well, the medical device manufacturers aren't doing anything because and they have their reasons, but there's been a lot of finger pointing. And collaboration in security, especially in healthcare, is so important because you can't update a surgical robotic during the middle of a surgery, right? You mentioned that earlier. You have to coordinate and you have to work together to make sure that that's doing. And I want to believe that that's happening. So maybe you can touch on that. But then I'd love, let's start there. And I'll ask the second question. I mean, is that improving?
I have to honestly say yes. Now, is it at the level that we would always want it to be? No, obviously, because of the challenges, that we have with some of these devices, right? If they're in an emergency room or, it's performing surgery, you can't just hit update, but the understanding that this isn't, these updates aren't necessarily to add a new feature to your product, but actually to address a potential risk. I think that's helping shift the approach and understanding, from our customers as well. And then for us to be able to start to look at how are we managing those updates and prioritizing them, within an organization, say, oh, same rule applies, right? Our software updates are not just for, a feature update or, some new, capability for customers, but it's a requirement. It's a regulatory requirement that we now must, be able to meet. So I think those two things are really shifting the paradigm. Now, all devices are not going to be 100% connected, and so you also have the challenge of having to update some of these things physically, right, in person, which is still going to be a reality for many years to come. And so it's, managing those two aspects, I think will slowly improve over time.
I like that. And I wonder if there will be certain drivers that will even push it more, like quantum computing. Any idea what what's the longest shelf life of one of your products? Do you have any idea how long one of your 200 sits on in a hospital system or another healthcare environment?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak specifically to one product, let's say, and I'll even use previous, prior BD experience here, but most medical devices have, let's call it, useful life of like 7+ years. And I think all of us know that many devices out there right now are probably 10 years plus out in the field. And medical devices are like a capital kind of investment from hospitals as well. So we don't expect them to be turning them over like, iPhones and laptops. And even if you look at that within large organizations, I think, what is it now? Like you get a new laptop every 3 years, and that's just a PC, right? It's not a medical device. So I think the understanding that a medical device's shelf life is far greater than any other piece of tech is well understood.
Yeah, the angle there that's interesting with updates, because once you can update a device, it allows you to continue to enhance the security. And there's been a lot of talk recently about quantum computing and the arrival of quantum computing. At HIMSS last week, it was a question that I got a ton after one of the presentations I did is, what's our forecast on when quantum is going to be here? And well,
Yeah.
nobody can put their finger on that.
Yeah.
There's certainly an effort of readiness that needs to be underway. And what the FDA is doing, I believe, also is helping prepare the industry for the arrival of quantum, because the way you prepare for quantum is to have the ability to update, at least on a device, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to communicate with that device so you can rotate the credentials to make them quantum resistant. And so update strategy for future proofing things like quantum is another great approach that I think the FDA gets with that language. And just for those of you watching, NIST is getting ready to release, I think, the final algorithms that will be selected for quantum computing in the near future. And so once that comes, DigiCert, we already have kind of a fun playground where you can come and test the algorithms that are being reviewed right now. And you can start playing around with them. And we see a lot of organizations trying to get more what we call crypto agile, which is the ability to rotate their credentials and update it so that when that day comes, they can do that quickly. Awesome. Anything else on updates?
Not for now, although there's more controversial kind of look at view on updating devices in the future, but we can table that for a little bit.
You want to crack that?
No, I think for me personally too is when we look at how we update devices, like actually like new versions of devices, new product launches, really looking at that and looking at the changes of how organizations look at the replacement or conversion rates of the previous devices, if you will. And it's not just necessarily updating a device, because there will be a point, I think, Mike, and you might agree, is you still won't be able to update a device that's 10 years old or 15 years. You're gonna end up with some level of limitations at some point. And so it's, are we really refreshing, if you will, the fleets of medical devices out there, and how we're planning on those type of things, and how we use new products to really refresh that, I think is an area for us to really consider.
Yeah, that's I think it was seven-ish years ago where Michael McNeil was he was product security lead at Philips at the time, but he was talking about cash for clunkers and asking if the FDA, right?
Yeah.
If the FDA would put money out, or the government would put money out to replace, and that's just not going to happen, right?
No.
That replacement is not going to happen because a lot of those devices are still performing great functionality and they're operating well. And you guys make amazing devices that last a long time.
Yeah.
And hospitals, as you said, capital expense, they don't want to replace those, and the government's not going to go do that. It's going to take time.
Yep.
And I think that what we see with HDOs to kind of mitigate some of the vulnerabilities of legacy devices that probably still have 5 to maybe 5+ years. They're working on that. And we've worked with a recent company customer where we updated, we're going to be pushing an update to 1 million infusion pumps globally that will update and enable some security functionality on that device. Yeah. So there are things that can happen and that can be done. But again, you have to plan for it. It takes time, and I think with time, in 10 years, we're going to be in a lot different environment than we are today. And it'll be a gradual improvement.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, I know we're winding a little on time. I just wanted to ask you, so as you step back, if someone on the call today is looking and saying, "Hey, Edison, how do we get started?" I've got a little bit of a cheat sheet here, but that you helped us craft. But what are the steps? And as organizations are getting ready to or trying to improve their compliance posture, what recommendations would you have for them?
Yeah, I think a little bit when we talk about this is also looking at, how you're developing products and planning, right, and become a huge component of this. And yeah, if you're taking those first steps, you've got to be honest with where your organization is, right? So you start out with that own assessment internally, going through your teams and knowing what policies you do have in place, what's your compliance to existing regulatory requirements, leveraging those things and creating almost a roadmap, if you will, of how you hope to achieve some of this. And going back to one of your slides before, Mike, is how do you pick where to start, right? Or what areas of solutions you want to drive first, and it has to become an exercise of what you need to prioritize either from a risk perspective, an effort, or cost perspective. I think you start using those, to really drive the discussion on how to plan for your organization.
Yeah, love that. I think that while these steps are high level, I certainly think that they are the right buckets. The first one, though, I think it's so hard because cyber is a new muscle. We've seen a lot of organizations that they're like, hey, we've got an engineer over here. Maybe they can run cyber, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
Sometimes that works, but it really requires organizations to develop new muscle. And that muscle develops with time. It's not something you just turn on one morning.
Yeah.
So I think that forethought and planning, I mean, you guys are in a much better position today because you've been on the journey for years, I would argue, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, it's like you can't just simply ask, to put one person into a different role and go. And you also can't just hire 100 new people in your organization to address something, right? There's an integration that needs to happen throughout the different groups, and it's also understanding that while you may bring in folks that are, let's say, focused on cybersecurity, say from an R&D perspective, or even like myself from a regulatory perspective, the expectation is that that one person or that one group can't now sustain 200 product teams, right? So it's really how you become, that advocate for, well, how does this now change a software developer's role within the organization to understand what components of cybersecurity they may now need to start looking out for, and how do we train those individuals, and how do we, enable them to reduce this, right? Don't make the problem worse, if you will. And same thing from a regulatory perspective. Hey, now you need to understand what the new regulatory landscape is becoming, and how you need to educate those teams to say, hey, what's the level of cybersecurity now that's expected for you to plan for that product launch from a regulatory perspective. And to your point, Mike, right, this doesn't happen overnight. You can't hire 100 people tomorrow, and you can't expect people to take on new responsibilities just at the flip of a switch. So there is an integration, there is a timing that needs to happen for this.
Yeah, I love that. And the policy perspective is interesting. I love what you guys, enforcement of policy. I mean, I remember the road show and the enablement training that you guys did after you identify tools that you're using to say, all right, now we need to train and we need to be able to enable and get teams to use them so that we can start enforcing the policies that we have, right? If signing your software is a policy, how do you enforce that through good management tools that give you visibility and transparency? And that too is really challenging, especially when you have a global team like you guys, because it takes a lot of effort and planning to make them aware of the policies and what they have to do, and then say, and by the way, we have a toolkit that can help you achieve compliance.
Yeah, it's how do you enable this? And I think from a regulatory perspective and even from a cyber perspective, a lot of the teams feel like they're the stage gate or bottleneck, or the people that come in and say you can't do certain things. And so if we change that narrative to say, no, this is obviously now a new regulatory requirement in many cases, especially in our industry, but this is how we're enabling the organization. This is how we're supporting the business. I'm a big advocate for making sure that you understand how your organization really works, right? Simple, right? How does your organization work? What is it that you guys do? How do you do business? and then looking at cybersecurity and ensuring it that they understand why it's not. Again, I think we're a little bit far from business enablement, right? Or differentiation, but making sure that it's not either a hurdle or a potential risk for your organization. And if we can do that effectively and be more of a partner with these different functions and teams, I think the better off we are.
Well said, man. Well said. All right. Well, I think I've gotten through my list of questions, Cal. Maybe I know there's been some engagement from the audience. Do we have a couple minutes for a few questions?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a fascinating discussion, guys. I really have enjoyed it. While you were talking, we've gotten a couple of questions in from our attendees. Just a reminder to folks that are tuning in, you can still send questions in by the chat. And if we can't get to them today, we'll be sure to follow up with you as quickly as possible. So the first question, in your experience, how do you balance the drive for innovation in medical devices with the imperative of robust security? Good question.
Go ahead, Edison.
Yeah. So I'll go back to something I was saying before, planning, right? And I'll say planning, and then do some more planning. I think when we look at innovation, that's driving, a new market or a new treatment. And so understanding that, where the organization is trying to place that innovation or meet that market demand is going to start to give you the requirements that you're going to have to meet. And so understanding, those complexities will help an organization help understand the balance because, and Mike, I'll go back to something you said before, like, just don't create software once and then put it out there. Well, you just don't get clearance or approval once and then you're done, right? Now you're expected to sustain that. So, looking at, balance between innovation is understanding the cost of ownership, if you will, of creating this new device or this new space and saying, well, what's it going to take to sustain and grow and manage that over its time? Comes down to, planning and really cross-functional alignment.
If I could, I'll share a quick story on this. It's an example of where security became an innovation, not a hindrance. And it was actually during COVID. We had a customer who does, they do laboratory equipment that analyze and do laboratory like blood tests and whatnot. And they wanted to update their devices to make them capable of doing rapid COVID testing. And they had the software deployed ready, but they were then looking at the lift of deploying field service engineers to update all their devices. And it was really, really challenging. But fortunately, the security team had acted ahead and had enabled device updates. And through a secure process that we helped them establish, they were able to, with a click of a few buttons, update hundreds of devices across the world, enabling them to do that rapid testing. Pretty cool. And the product security lead of that company became like the poster child of innovation, but it really was security. And so oftentimes, I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, innovation is stifled by security. And
no.
I just don't, I don't buy into that. Technology is good enough and connectivity is everywhere. Security has to be there. And you can still be innovative with security.
No, I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's like even in our cell phones today, you have your, multi-factor authentication and you have, different requirements. It hasn't stopped people from using their phones, right? So it's definitely not a deterrent. It's just understanding, how security can fit within that model. And removing excuses that cybersecurity is, becoming a deterrent. Yeah, good point, Mike.
Yeah, I always say if people are telling you that, you've got the wrong security person.
Yeah. Very true.
It might come back to bite me, but I certainly don't. I don't think you lose a ton of innovation with good security.
You don't have to. How about we? There, you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to. All right.
Well said. All right, one other question. What are the best metrics to know that your company is moving in the right direction in this area? Sounds like another one for you, Edison.
Yeah, so metrics, Mike, would you say data is king, right? It's what everybody needs to know, and use. I think when it comes to cybersecurity, often enough, going back to this theme, right, where hey, what's my return on investment for cyber outside of compliance? And like it's hard to quantify sometimes, but when you look at metrics, it's like, well, how how easily can you show that you're managing this well? And so being able to really see data, from a like a post market, let's say, compliance perspective. Obviously you have a clearance or you get through or an approval, that's your first marker. But then it's like, okay, well, how many devices are out there that have this? How many updates have we pushed? And being able to do that not just quickly, but accurately, and driving that sense of this is where we're at as an organization, I think is going to be really important. So like when we look at these regulatory requirements, talk about updating those devices. If you have an issue, being able to demonstrate that those devices have been updated, or even how many devices are impacted, is going to become more and more critical. The data-driven solutions, centralized solutions, are going to be more and more of what companies need to be able to do this easily.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up. I mean, I'll just do a shameless plug on this. We DigiCert has spent a lot of time in compliance in a lot of different industries. I mean, from website security to medical device, we've worked with the FDA, we've done work in automotive. We're all over the place helping regulations, and we build our products really to help drive compliance to those regulations. And we have a suite of solutions that our customers use to help them achieve compliance. Everything from identity on devices to authenticating connections of connected medical or any other type of connected device, to securing the software, vulnerability scanning, creation of software bill of materials, and then all the protections that you need on the enterprise around secure VPN and user access and servers and all of that. We do this all through our single sign-on platform, DigiCert One. And Edison and BD, we certainly appreciate the partnership that we have with you guys, using these tools to help you achieve compliance. Edison, thanks again so much for your time today. You are so fun to talk to. I always learn so much in our discussions, and hearing you talk about the way you think about challenges and the thoughtful approach you bring to them. So thank you. Cal, I'll kick it back over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. This was really enjoyable. Edison, Mike, great job. I also want to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of your day to attend the session on compliance plus security in the connected device era. We hope to see you at one of our upcoming events soon. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Cal Harrison.